So, one of the things you hear, shall we say, from the let's be kind in this instance, but also let's not be as well, and call them the dumb left. Again, we'll use the name from the Majority Report for them. One of the things they have constantly said is that Ukraine is not willing to negotiate. That Biden and the West and these NATO countries are forcing Ukraine to fight on, and that they are killing even more Ukrainian citizens because of their their bloodthirstiness and their wanting to defeat Russia. Well, again, I remind people who started this invasion. It was Russia. It certainly wasn't Ukraine. But recently at the G20, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy gave his proposal. He gave what are essentially his 10-point plans that really are incredibly reasonable. There is no reason to suggest that if anyone was looking at these, that these 10 points are not reasonable. And if Russia was willing, they could end the war tomorrow if they signed up to this. Like, the war would literally be over if they were signing up to this. But unfortunately, the Russians aren't, because the Russian position is absolutely insane. They are still absolutely adamant that not only can they control all that territory that they have taken, but even the parts that they haven't taken yet, but also force into Ukraine. They want to arrest Zelenskyy. They want military bases built in Ukraine as well. Their plans and initiatives are just absolutely insane. And most of it, from what we can at least see, is designed so that essentially in 5 or 10 years time, Russia can go, well, we like that part of Ukraine. Oh, and we want that part as well. And they can just literally just pull more parts of Ukraine away. And one of the things that has been sort of certainly noted is that Russia in the past has used ceasefires not to actually open and engage in constructive talks or peace negotiations, but they have used this time instead to reinforce troops, buy more time for the troops onto the ground to sort of dig into positions, prepare for, future attacks. So it's again something that we have to be concerned about. But like I say, we're going to go through these 10 points, but every single one of these points is incredibly reasonable. And remember, this has been proposed by Ukraine. And this, if Russia was seriously willing, as Russia says, oh, we want to talk peace. We want to talk peace. But the thing is, they want to talk peace on their terms. And their terms are, we get everything, Ukraine gets nothing. And essentially, Ukraine pretty much becomes a puppet state of Russia. So before we go into these 10 points, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, down below, there are links to my one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club as well, down below, that you can join as well. So, over we go to these 10 points. So what are these 10 points? And to be honest, I think every single point here is entirely reasonable and very just for Ukraine to sort of ask for. So the first one is radiation and nuclear safety. Obviously, a big key factor in this war, even pointed out by the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is the first time that a nuclear power plant has come under deliberate attack by conventional warfare, with it being shelled, it being targeted, for attack, and being under military control. So the first point that Zelenskyy says is, hey, Russia, pull your troops out of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and allow it to be taken over by the International Atomic Agency and allow the Ukrainian workers back in so that they can, get on with their job and make sure that this plant is nuclear safe and that it can start supplying power back to the region. So that is, first of all, point one. That's entirely reasonable. Point two, food security. Ukraine is one of the fifth largest, I think they are, producers of grain in the world. There are a lot of countries that rely on Ukraine for essentially their food security. So Ukraine needs to start and really get exporting its food back to the world as quickly as possible. And that is already in place, but it needs to be done in a safe way. So we know that these ships that are transporting these grains is not going to come under attack by Russian fire, and that Russia is going to stop these shipments, because Russia has been using this war to try and rally other African countries to its side by saying, oh, the reason you're not getting your food isn't because of us, and because we've invaded Ukraine. It's because Ukraine doesn't want to ship you food. And again, this plays into their whole story they've got about Ukraine. So that's, again, second point, entirely reasonable. Third point, energy security. So this is really about, again, making sure that Russia stops bombarding its energy plants and energy infrastructure. Not only that, but some surrounding countries like Moldova, certainly parts of sort of Poland, and I think even potentially Hungary, a lot of them got a lot of their power from the surplus energy that Ukraine could supply through its power plants. So that is a big sort of money and wealth generated for Ukraine, but it's also causing huge problems in places like Moldova, because Moldova, I think they were like 40% of their energy comes from Ukraine. So in Moldova at the moment, that is a big political point, because energy prices over there are skyrocketing because of this war. So that is reasonable. So number 4, the release of prisoners and deportees. So this isn't just about military combats. It's not about just Ukrainian soldiers, because hundreds of thousands of civilians in these occupied areas have been abducted, disappeared, and disappeared in some cases into places in Russia. And they don't know where they've gone to. We know that certainly some of the military people that have been captured have been tortured. And there's also over 11,000 children being deported. And the other worrying thing is that in some of these places, the Russians were coming in to some of these orphanages and just taking the children. We still don't know where they've gone or what's happened to them. So that is something certainly that is more than reasonable and sort of right for Ukraine to ask, hey, give us back our citizens that you've taken and forcefully deported. So 5, the implementations of the UN Charter. So this is basically saying that not only should the world, and Russia included, recognize the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So essentially, Russia must undo its claims and reaffirm the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and that includes Crimea, Zaporozhye, Donbass, Luhansk. All those areas must go back to Ukraine, and that is certainly one thing that should be done, because Russia should not be allowed to gain any territory from this very, very illegal war that they have prosecuted. So 6, and this obviously is the big one. So withdrawal of Russian troops and the cessation of hostilities. As we said at the beginning, one of the big things that Russia has done in the past is done ceasefires, and they've made big claims that, oh, we're going to, withdraw our troops, etc., etc. But Zelenskyy here is being smart, because we know in the past Russia have done this. They've called for ceasefire. They've said they're going to pull troops out, but they haven't done it. Instead, they've reinforced positions and sort of dug in more to buy more time for future assaults. And this is certainly something we should definitely expect from Russia, because they have done this multiple times in the past. So the complete withdrawal from all Russian troops from Ukrainian territories back into Russian territories, and that Ukraine gets full, complete control of its borders, is well and just. And that includes Crimea as well. So, number 7, justice. We have seen throughout all this this war, we have seen the terrible things that Russian soldiers have done. And Zelenskyy is asking for a special international tribunal to be set up. And again, I think he's more than within his right to ask for this. We've seen the stories coming out of, the mass graves, the torture that some prisoners have been inflicted upon them, the rapes that we've seen, and documented. These Ukrainians deserve justice. And I think that is, again, as we said before, it's more than reasonable for Zelenskyy to ask for this. So, number 8, the ecocide and the protection of the environment. So, a big part of, obviously, this war that doesn't really get mentioned is that a lot of Ukrainian forests have been burned. We're talking millions and millions of hectares of forest land and farmland and, environments burned away because of shelling, all the sort of the munitions that have rained down and started fires. And this is unfortunately what has happened. And it needs to sort of, be protected, but they need international help on that. Water is a big thing that's been happening as well. A lot of the water purification plants in Ukraine have also been attacked and need help as well to be sort of get restarted and recreated. So again, that's an entirely decent and fair proposal for Ukraine to make. And so number 9 is the prevention of escalation. And this is, again, a key point. Ukraine wants to be part of NATO. And I think this is the key point, to get security guarantees so that Russia cannot and can never invade again. Because if Ukraine was part of NATO, this would have never have happened. This would have never have happened. And the big key thing is there are a lot of other countries going, whew, I'm glad we're part of NATO when all this was going on. Because if you may remember, Putin's speeches very early on in this war and his crazy ramblings was claiming other territory that was, clearly and blatantly other countries' territory. You may remember we talked about the president of Azerbaijan having to phone up Putin and saying, you've claimed our territory. Should I be worried? So absolutely right and perfectly fine thing for, Ukraine to ask for. And then finally, the confirmation of the end of the war. And of course, this one is the biggie. Zelenskyy wants a clear and definitive end to this. And he wants sort of not only Russia to come and sign this and say, we agree to all these things. Yes, the war is ending. Key point, war. And to at least acknowledge that, yes, this was indeed a war, not a, quote, special military operation that they like to refer it to as. And that will, I think, send a very large message that indeed Russia has lost. And again, I think it's quite right for for Zelenskyy to ask for this. So whenever next time you hear someone on the left going, oh, Zelensky's trying to, prolong the war and, prolong suffering, remember, he has a 10-point peace plan. It is here. We've just gone through it. Every single point Zelenskyy has put forward is entirely reasonable and justifiable. But the problem is Russia will never agree to it because it is still in the mindset that it can still take and hold all this territory that it wants and enforce its demands on Ukraine and somehow make it again a Russian puppet state. That is still Russia's aims and goals. So remember, when someone says, "Oh, but Russia's got all these, nice quotations, nice peace proposals," they are not any sane or rational world where any country would accept those. Now, these, on the other hand, I think anyone can look at these 10 points and say, yes, we can sort of agree and live with those. So, as always, guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching. But I think, to be honest, this is something that I wanted to sort of do and cover because, we very often sort of, keep our eyes on what's going on over in Ukraine every so often. I think this is very worthwhile discussing because you often see this come up. And certainly from a lot of people on the left who aren't sort of maybe well informed or are for some reason drinking the Russian Kool-Aid. Go figure. But yeah. So anyway, we've gone through those, and I think, like I say, I cannot see any reason as to why, people would not accept this. The only reason they wouldn't accept it is because, it's Vladimir Putin. And of course, he wants a sort of big win in Ukraine. And everything here basically signals you have lost. And to be honest, that should be made firmly clear that Russia has lost and that it was their fault for pursuing this war in the first place. And I cannot see any point in here that isn't really valid. I mean, everything the point here is perfectly fine and justifiable, but will Russia's even signed to it? I mean, bear in mind, they haven't even responded to these 10 points. So if you do hear someone from the left saying, why hasn't, Ukraine or NATO sort of responded to sort of, Russia's peace overtures, ask them, well, why haven't they responded to Zelensky's 10 points here? Just worthy question, probably. So, as always, guys, thank you very much, as always, for watching. And, of course, thank you very much for all the support. Again, you give the channel, like I say, it's all down below. The thank you button, the buy me coffee, my Patreon page, all down below. And, of course, we'll see you all next time.